I'm Stephen Goldfeder, co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs, the team building Arbitrim. Arbitrim is the leading layer 2 scaling platform for Ethereum, and today I'm going to talk about the age of rollups. Arbitrim's technology is an optimistic rollup. But what is a rollup? What defines it technically, and how did it come to be that rollups are leading the charge for scaling Ethereum? Today I'm going to take a look under the hood, both at how we're building Arbitrim from a technical perspective, but also how we together as a community are building Arbitrim's ecosystem. And hopefully you'll come away from today's talk with a better understanding of how Arbitrim works, a better appreciation of Arbitrim's vast ecosystem, and also ideas of how you can get involved, because both from a technical and non-technical perspective, there are many, many ways to contribute to both Arbitrim's and Ethereum's flourishing ecosystem. The history of rollup goes back quite some time, but I'm going to go back 2 years ago to the point where I believe it really solidified that rollups were the key to scaling Ethereum. In October 2020, Vitalik Buterin put out a blog post about Ethereum's rollup-centric roadmap. That is to say that rollups were central to the plans and the technical development of Ethereum. Rollups were the scaling solution for Ethereum that would bring Ethereum's security and decentralization to the masses. But the question is, what is a rollup, and how does it differ from some other technical scaling solutions? Rollup is, the key idea of a rollup is to take the transaction data, all the user transactions, and post that data on Ethereum, but take the execution of those transactions and take those off of Ethereum. Now, you can think of a transaction, when you submit a transaction to, say, Ethereum, you can think of a transaction in two different ways. On the one hand, it's just a blob of data, some zeros and ones that, just a blob of data. But on the other hand, it's a set of instructions. It says, hey, this blob of data has meaning. It says, hey, add these numbers or compute this value or store this. And what rollups do is they say, okay, let's put all that data on Ethereum. Let's use Ethereum to store the blobs of data, but the execution of those instructions, we're going to take off-chain and just report back the result to Ethereum. Now, the key value proposition of rollups is that they derive their security from Ethereum. You want Ethereum to both vouch for the correctness of the data that's stored on-chain, but also the execution that happens off-chain. And the question then becomes, how do you get Ethereum to validate what happens off-chain? And the key is proving to Ethereum, having a mechanism by which you can prove to Ethereum the correctness of not only what's stored on-chain, but also the off-chain execution. And in optimistic rollups, we use interactive fraud proofs to prove to Ethereum that that the result that we're reporting of what happened off-chain is correct. Now, in doing so, we're able to take a lot of this execution, a lot of the work off of Ethereum, and therefore scale, because we use Ethereum in a much more compressed format. We use Ethereum space not to do the execution, but just to store the data, and we're able to take the execution off. So we get more space and also much cheaper transactions because we're using less of Ethereum's capacity to do the same transaction. Now at Offchain Labs, as part of the Arbitrim suite of technologies, we're also building out another technical solution, which we call the AnyTrust technology. AnyTrust technology is quite similar to a rollup, but it has one big difference, in that it doesn't put all of that data on Ethereum. Instead, it relies on what we call a data availability committee. So it sends data to a committee. Now, from there, it does the rest on Ethereum. It reports the results back to Ethereum, and it has a fraud-proof mechanism that works on Ethereum, but it has a data availability committee that stores that data. And it turns out that one of the largest costs in a rollup, actually the largest cost in the rollup, is storing the data. So if we're able to utilize a committee, we're able to reduce the cost significantly. Now, in doing so, we don't have the full security of Ethereum anymore because we are relying on a data availability committee, but the AnyTrust technology is still highly secure and much more secure than a sidechain, because as its name suggests, AnyTrust requires you just to rely on one or two of the committee members, whereas a typical sidechain would require you to trust a majority and even a supermajority, typically 2/3 of the validators, to be honest. So we have Arbitrim rollup technology, which derives its full security from Ethereum, and the Arbitrim AnyTrust technology, which utilizes a data availability committee, and in doing so is able to reduce costs, but still provide a very, very high level of security and much higher than some other scaling solutions. Now, we've talked about the technologies that we're building, but what about the chains that implement these technologies? And we have two chains that are live today. one implementing each of these technologies. We have Arbitrim 1, and this is our chain that's been live for longer. It's been live for over a year now, the one that launched in August of 2021, so just over a year ago. And this is an optimistic rollup. Remember, rollup, so it puts all the data on Ethereum. And we have Arbitrim Nova, which we actually just launched in August, and this is our any trust chain, in that it doesn't post all the data to Ethereum, instead utilizes a data availability committee. And stay tuned, just in a few minutes, we'll look at who is on that committee in practice. Now, what do Arbitrim 1 and Arbitrim Nova share in common? They're both general purpose chains, so you can launch contracts on them, users can permissionlessly interact with them, and they both provide significant scale and reduced fees compared to Ethereum. Arbitrim 1, the fees are about 10 to 50x cheaper than Ethereum on average. In Arbitrim Nova, because we don't post the data on Ethereum, we're able to scale and get fees even lower, about 30 to 150x cheaper than Ethereum generally. Both of these chains, though, have ultra-fast confirmations. If you used Arbitrim 1 or Arbitrim Nova, you've probably noticed that when you press confirm your transaction, you get a result just about immediately. And that is a feature of all the products that we have at Arbitrim, these fast confirmations, which leads to a much, much better user experience, and it's an experience that many users are just much more familiar with. Now, are these two chains competing with each other? No, they're not. Even though they're both general purpose chains, they have very different focus and very different ecosystem built on them. Arbitrim 1 is a DeFi stronghold and also has some strong high-value NFT projects, whereas Arbitrim Nova is really targeted at gaming and social. Now, there are three tenets that we believe in for scaling Ethereum, and these apply to all the technologies that we built, both Arbitrim 1, our rollup chain, as well as Arbitrim Nova, our AnyTrust chain. And number one is cheap transactions. It sounds simple, but that's what users really, really want when they say we want a scaling solution. They want to pay less money. They want to have much cheaper transactions. And technically, we do that by keeping Arbitrim's layer 1 footprint, the amount that we have to use Ethereum for, low, but also doing just enough to get the security derived from Ethereum. Number two is high security, right? So you want cheap transactions, but you don't want to sacrifice security to get that. And therefore, we believe that security should be very, very high, and we do not compromise security to get those cheap transactions. And both Arbitrim 1 and Arbitrim Nova both prioritize security. Of course, Arbitrim 1 is a full rollup and puts the data on Ethereum. Arbitrim Nova relies additionally on the data availability committee, but both are focused on providing cheap transactions with high security. And the third tenet is drop-in compatibility. And the idea here is that we want it to just work. If you're an Ethereum developer and you have knowledge that you've already built up of how to develop on Ethereum, and you have code that you've written, we want both that knowledge and that code to apply directly on Arbitrim. You may have heard the term Evm Compatibility or Evm equivalent. Both Arbitrim 1 and Arbitrim Nova are as compatible with Evm as possible. And what that means is that all of your code that you wrote for Ethereum and that knowledge that you built will just work on Arbitrim. And that's why we see that so many apps have successfully deployed in Arbitrim 1 and Arbitrim Nova, because it's just so simple for them to do that if they've launched on Ethereum. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't over time make it even easier and an even better developer experience in Arbitrim, but as a core tenet, everything that works in Ethereum should work on Arbitrim, and then we can say, okay, how do we make this even better? How do we solve some problems that to make it even easier than building on Ethereum? But as a core tenet, everything that works on Ethereum should work on Arbitrim. And these are the three core tenets that we have to scaling. So cheap transactions, but not at the expense of security. Cheap transactions, high security, and also drop-in compatibility. That is to say that we are fully compatible with Ethereum, and both developer and user tools just work right out of the box. Now let's take a look at the Arbitrim development timeline. So it was October 2020, that same month that Vitalik put out that roll-up-centric roadmap blog post, that we launched the Arbitrim 1 initial testnet. And this was a very big moment, both for us, but as well as for the Ethereum community, because it was the first general purpose rollup fully built out on testnet, and was really a great opportunity both for us and the public to test Arbitrim. And the months that followed, we improved and learned a lot. And it was in May of that year that we actually launched Arbitrim 1 on mainnet. But we launched it first for developers. So what does that mean? We launched Arbitrim 1 on mainnet for developers. Well, our theory was that we wanted this to be a fair launch. Very, very important to us that we didn't want to prioritize one party over another and give certain apps or infrastructure priority access. We wanted everyone to be on the same footing. And in doing so, we said, okay, here's a period of time, it turned out to be 3 months, so between May and August of 2021, where only developers were allowed on the chain. And we were pretty permissive with developers. We let in literally hundreds of teams and said, okay, you can build your apps and test your apps, because when opening day came and we allowed users in, we wanted everyone to be on the same footing, and that was our fair launch strategy. If you've watched the Bankless shows, you may have heard their analogy of roll-ups as amusement parks. And to continue that analogy, basically, we were opening up a new amusement park with Arbitrim 1, and before we let the users in, or the people that would ride the rides, we first let the ride makers in to actually build those experiences. And what happened was, in August of 2021, when we launched Arbitrim 1, there were already many, many apps and infrastructure that users could immediately use. So the ecosystem was really flourishing from day one. And to do that, we did a fair launch where everyone was on the same footing. Everyone had the opportunity to both build and test their applications. So when when the doors of this amusement park opened up for users, everyone was ready for them. And basically, that's what happened. There were on launch many, many apps that people could use. Over the next year, of course, you saw many, many apps building on Arbitrim, but we weren't done. We went back to the drawing board and said, hey, how can we make Arbitrim even better? And we built Arbitrim Nitro, which in April, we launched the Arbitrim Nitro DevNet or testnet for developers. And in August, just a few weeks ago, we migrated Arbitrim 1 to the Nitro stack. And we'll talk a lot more about that. But it was a big upgrade for our network that meant lower fees, higher bandwidth, and overall better developer and user experience. August was a busy month. Not only did we launch Arbitrim 1, did we migrate Arbitrim 1 to the Nitro stack, we also launched the Arbitrim Nova blockchain. Remember, we were discussing Arbitrim Nova is our AnyTrust chain. That was actually launched just a few weeks ago in August. So let's take a look at the Arbitrim 1 ecosystem and who's building on it. What does it look like from a developer and user perspective? What can you do there? Well, there are about 40,000 contracts that have been deployed to Arbitrim 1 to date. It's the leading layer 2 solution for Ethereum with over 50% market share among rollups, and over 1 million unique addresses have used Arbitrim to date. But who's there? Well, interestingly, it's all the DeFi blue chips, just about all the DeFi blue chips that you know from Ethereum. So that's like Uniswap, SushiSwap, Curve, Aave, Urine Balancer, but also new projects that are Arbitrim native. Newer projects that didn't launch on Ethereum and call Arbitrim their home, such as Dopex, Vesta, GMX, Tracer, TreasureDAO. These are both DeFi and NFT projects that have launched on Arbitrim and are Arbitrim native projects. So together with the DeFi blue chips that you might be familiar with from Ethereum, we have many, many Arbitrim native projects as well that are building both DeFi and strong NFT ecosystems on Arbitrim. And remember I talked about that compatibility? Well, that applies not only to applications, but it also applies to infrastructure, that everything on Arbitrim just feels familiar and works, both from an infrastructure and an application perspective. And to facilitate that, we have many infrastructure providers that are building on Arbitrim, all the familiar infrastructure from Ethereum. So for example, we have Chainlink Oracles offering their price feeds and other services on Arbitrim. We have The Graph, we have Gnosis Safe, Alchemy, Infura, QuickNote. These are mostly developer tools, but also user tools like Etherscan is available on Arbitrim. And the idea is that the Ethereum ecosystem, both from a developer perspective, but also from an end user perspective, will feel very, very familiar. And all the tooling and apps that you know from Ethereum, plus many, many more, can be drop-in compatible and easily launch on Arbitrim, and many, many of them have. So we've talked about what there is to do on Arbitrim, but you might be asking yourself, okay, how do I get to Arbitrim? How do I onboard onto Arbitrim? There are all these apps there, but how do I get my funds there? And the good news is there are many, many ways to onboard to Arbitrim. For those users who keep their funds in a centralized exchange, many centralized exchanges, about a dozen to date, have already turned on direct onboarding into Arbitrim. What that means is you go to the exchange and you say, hey, I want to withdraw, and you have an option to withdraw to Arbitrim. And we have many exchanges, including Binance, FTX, Crypto.com, and many others that are offering their onboarding and offboarding directly into the Arbitrim ecosystem. But for those users that keep their money on Ethereum or another blockchain, there are also decentralized bridges that support Arbitrim. So you can use the native Arbitrim bridge to go from Ethereum to Arbitrim, but there's also third-party bridges like Hop, Connext, Stellar, Synapse, Debridge, Stargate that allow you to go to and from Arbitrim from other blockchains as well, from Ethereum and other blockchains, and easily onboard onto the Arbitrim ecosystem. And we also have plenty of fiat on-ramps on Arbitrim 1 that allow you to buy assets directly on Arbitrim with your credit card. So there's no shortage of ways for users to get their funds on Arbitrim and start experiencing the cheaper fees, better experience, faster experience of Layer 2 and the vast ecosystem of applications that exist there. I mentioned earlier the Nitro upgrade that we did a few weeks ago. Let me talk a little bit more about that. First, from a technical perspective. So what is the Nitro upgrade? What did it do? And the basic idea is, until a few weeks ago from launch, we were using what's called the Arbitrim virtual machine. That's what we were running on chain. That's what our interactive fraud proofs were using. And it was a virtual machine architecture that we built ourselves. And also, to go with that, we had a node, a custom built node that we built ourselves. And it was working quite well, but we were able to actually replace some of the components we built ourselves with other components that are more standard, such as WASM or WebAssembly, as well as Ethereum's Geth code. We were able to replace our node with Ethereum's Geth node, and in doing so, we were able to take advantage of many of those improvements that have gone into those years of development and make our developer experience even closer to Ethereum. We also introduced advanced call data compression, which means we compress the data that we put on Ethereum. And remember, all transaction data goes on Ethereum, so if you compress the data and make it smaller, it's going to be a lot better for users because we're using less of Ethereum space, which means we can put more data on Ethereum, and it costs less to put data on Ethereum as well. So we successfully migrated to Nitro on August 31st of this year. That was actually the exact 1 year birthday, the 1 year anniversary of when we opened up to users, and it was a really, really big event for us, and symbolic of the fact that, you know, we're not done. We built Arbitrim 1 year ago, and then we went back to the drawing board and said, how do we make it even better? And then we continue to ask ourselves, how do we make it even better? But the migration was also seamless. Users didn't have to, do anything to really prepare for it, and it was really a seamless migration for them because the ecosystem is live. And as an analogy I like to use is, Arbitrim 1 was running, if you think about it as an airplane, Arbitrim 1 was in the air, and we swapped the engine mid-air. So we took the AVM classic engine, retired that, and we put the Nitro engine in the Arbitrim 1 airplane. So that's a little bit of technically of what we did, but you might be wondering, okay, so what did that accomplish? And the basic idea is it increased throughput. So now, before Nitro, we were running with about the same capacity as Ethereum and Arbitrim. Now we 7x that. So we 7x our capacity post Nitro. I remember I said that advanced call data compression. Well, we were able to pass along those savings to users. So it costs less to post that data on Ethereum because we're posting less of it, we're compressing it better, which means transaction fees that post that data cost less. So we pass the savings along to users, so now users' transactions in Arbitrim are much less. And there's also many developer affordances that are enabled in Nitro because we're using the Geth node. A lot of the internals, like the gas accounting, as well as the tracing support, just became the exact same as Ethereum. So it became even more compatible with Ethereum, and Arbitrim Nitro is as compatible with Ethereum as a rollup can possibly be today, and we're very, very excited about that. Now, just to touch on Arbitrim Nova for just a minute. What is Arbitrim Nova? Remember, that is our AnyTrust chain. So the question is, how does that work? Let's talk about that a little bit. Remember, the key of AnyTrust is that it doesn't post the data on Ethereum. Instead, it sends it to a data availability committee. In practice, what does that look like from a technical perspective? Well, the Arbitrim sequencer, when you send your transactions in Arbitrim, you send it to the sequencer. Usually the sequencer will post your transaction data on Ethereum in a rollup. In an AnyTrust chain like Arbitrim Nova, it doesn't post the data to Ethereum. Instead, the sequencer sends it to a data availability committee, and it asks the data availability committee to sign a certificate. And that's what it posts on Ethereum. So rather than posting the data on Ethereum, it posts a certificate that says, hey, this data is available by the data availability committee on Ethereum. And the really, really cool thing about Nova, one of my favorite things about Nova, is that it has a fallback to rollup, a fallback to posting data on Ethereum, which says, yes, we try to post that data on Ethereum, but let's say the committee becomes unavailable. Does the chain just stop? No, it doesn't, because if the committee is not available, we post that data on Ethereum. So the Nova has a fallback to rollup. The Nova Antitrust chain can fall back to rollup. So for any reason that committee is not doing its job properly, the chain continues to operate. The fees will go up because instead of sending the data to Ethereum, instead of sending the data to the data availability committee, you're sending it to Ethereum, but the chain will continue to operate just like a rollup does. Now, who is on the Nova Data Availability Committee? That's a great question. And the answer is it's a mix of some really powerful some really powerful and really strong Web 2 and Web 3 brands. And to give you an idea of who it is, it's us at Offchain Labs, as well as Reddit, Consensus, QuickNode, FTX, P2P, and Google Cloud. So a mix of Web 2 and Web 3 companies. And remember, the idea is the users need to just trust one or two of these members to do their job correctly, and that's why it's exciting to have a mix and a variety of different brands there, so many users can get comfort that their data is being stored securely. Who's using Arbitrim Nova? So in July of 2020, Reddit put out a contest which was called it the Great Reddit Scaling Bake-Off, and the idea was Reddit had this community points system, these blockchain tokens that they would give to users for interacting in their communities, and it was on testnet, but they wanted to bring this to mainnet. They wanted to bring this Reddit community points experience to mainnet, but they didn't know how to scale it, and therefore they asked the community to propose scaling solutions. So about 20 plus teams submitted to that, including us at Arbitrim. It was in 2021 that Reddit announced that Arbitrim had won that competition, and it was just a few weeks ago that Reddit launched on the Arbitrim Nova mainnet. And interestingly, on day one of Reddit's launch, they brought over 200,000 users to the Arbitrim ecosystem. And this to me is very, very exciting, because when people say, how do we get to the next billion users? It's not by bringing a billion users directly to the crypto community. It's by tapping into these existing ecosystem. Reddit's larger community has 400 million monthly active users approximately, and by bringing Arbitrim closer to Reddit, we have an opportunity to onboard many more users to Arbitrim One. Today, it's live in 2 subreddits on Reddit on Arbitrim Nova. These community points are live in 2 subreddits today. What are the Nova gas savings? Remember, Nova doesn't post data to Nova doesn't post data to Ethereum. Instead, it posts it to a data availability committee, and in doing so, it's able to even further reduce gas costs compared to Arbitrim One. Arbitrim One is about 97% cheaper than Ethereum. Nova's even cheaper. And to give you an idea of the prices on launch week, it was about less than 1 cent to do an ETH transfer on Nova, and about 2 to 3 cents to do an ERC20 swap. So quite low cost. And the nice thing about Nova also is, since it doesn't post all that data on Ethereum, it's less impacted by the price fluctuations on Ethereum, and therefore the fees are generally much more stable on Nova as well. So who is Nova for, you may ask, and are these chains, are Arbitrim One and Arbitrim Nova competing with each other? Not really. Arbitrim One is a DeFi and NFT stronghold, whereas Nova is really targeted at gaming developers and social projects, and really projects that have high throughput, many users, touch the blockchain frequently, and in order for their application to work, they need these ultra low fees that Nova can offer. So Nova is really differentiated in that it's targeting gaming and social, and these developers that need ultra low fees but really want much higher security compared to other types of scaling solutions, and that's why they'll choose Nova and the Antitrust technology. Thank you so much for listening to my talk today. I hope it was useful, and if you're interested and want to learn more and get involved in our community, here are some resources. You can look at Inside Arbitrim. That is a deep dive into the technical in and outs of Arbitrim. You can go even deeper than we went today. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter if you want to follow our product announcements and interesting updates and partnerships. And if you want to get involved in that conversation, you can go a step further and join our Discord and ask questions there, and maybe even answer other people's questions and really engage in the community. And of course, you can contact us with any inquiries or how you might want to get involved. That's partnerships@offchainlabs.com. Thank you so much for listening today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.